you know, in a sense, I look around and I feel that, you know, there are many different forces that are converging to monopolize and privatize the commons and lands in particular right now, or at least my focus. And it's creating a whole sort of a new world order that's going to be very unfriendly to many people, and also to biodiversity and the ecosystems as well. My father was one of the founders of the Environmental Defense Fund. They used to, you know, back in the early 70s, they used to meet in our living room, and it was like just a handful of people, just like the handful of people I work with now, and they were all good friends, and they worked together, and they celebrated their victories, and they were, you know, they did some really great stuff. And I'll tell you something, he would be rolling over in his grave right now if he saw what Environmental Defense Fund has turned into. It's really disturbing, you know. The Environmental Defense Fund, for example, you know, is a partner in the U.S. Climate Action Partnership. The U.S. Climate Action Partnership has basically been sort of the architects of the marketing approaches to dealing with climate change that we've seen, like cap and trade in the Waxman-Markey climate bill, and also at the international level and elsewhere. Environmental Defense Fund has been always a huge proponent of these market-based solutions, which we have many reasons to be very skeptical about. And they really believe it. You know, I've spent a lot of time debating. I actually took part in a protest, and we went into the Environmental Defense Fund offices and kind of made a point about our disagreements. And that spurred a whole long series of interactions with. She needs to do. So. That spurred a whole long series of interactions with some of these people who were friends of my father, who sat around in the living room with him. And, you know, we're all a lot older now. But it really became clear to me after many, many exchanges that they are so firmly committed to this that there is, it's a very solid barrier that we'll never get past. So the U.S. Climate Action Partnership, you know, involves Environmental Defense Fund and NRDC and a couple of other big environmental organizations. And these big environmental organizations have really, you know, they've become such an obstruction to those of us who work, you know, in the smaller organizations and to, you know, who are just people. We are not invited to the table, you know. Our voices are not heard, and part of the reason they're not heard is because supposedly there's environmentalists at the table already, right? And the big groups are already sitting at that table, and so the corporations get to say, look, we've consulted with the environmentalists, and this is what they recommend to us. They tell us that we need to, you know, have a carbon market, and that's going to solve the problems, and they feel good about it. So they have this beautiful partnership, and you go to the U.S. Climate Action Partnership website, and they're very proud of this alliance between the companies and the big environmental organizations. But it's, as I said, it's been a huge obstruction for the rest of us who really, you know, the thing is, we've been doing we've been friendly to corporations for a very long time. We've made things convenient and easy for them for a very long time, and it hasn't worked. We haven't gotten where need to go, and we know that by now. We should let them step aside and let the rest of the environmental community who would like to also have a voice in this process. So, you know, that's one of my biggest gripes with that situation. But, you know, I also see organizations like EDF, they go to the international level, and again, they push their market-based solutions. They have actually, you know, I watch them sometimes in action, and I realize they don't understand. They don't understand the perspective of people outside of that sort of very wealthy, elite, highly educated DC community. They go to, you know, to countries in the developing world, and they explain how, you know, if you just market the carbon in your forests, we're gonna, you know, it's gonna be really great for everybody. And they don't really explain what is that gonna mean for you on the ground. You are not gonna actually own your forests in the same way that you do now. You know, it might be convenient for somebody in that wealthy elite DC community to have some place to offset their emissions or whatever, but it's not necessarily going to work out well for people who live on that land and who are not part of that. They're not part of that culture. They're not part of that economy. They live in a very different world, and I don't think the people at EDF have any concept or understanding of that, to tell you the truth. I'm sure some of them have been outside the boundaries of the United States from time to time and been there, but you know, we see them really pushing very hard to push an agenda onto like indigenous people about reducing emissions and deforestation and degradation. They really have an agenda that they're pushing, and they work very hard in very politically savvy ways to convince people that this is going to be good for them. And they do not give them an honest assessment. They do not provide a balanced view of what the implications of that will be. They have a very strong agenda, and their agenda is dictated in large part by their partnerships with their corporate friends back in the big world, back in the big money world.